Dog sat outside the gate for days. What the stranger did next will leave you in tears. Near the edge of a quiet farming township, where dust clings to fence posts and the days pass without much change, a thin brown dog lay still outside a rusted garden gate. Her paws were tucked beneath her chest, tail curled in tightly. There was no collar around her neck, no rope, no sign she had escaped anything. But she didn't run. She didn't beg. She didn't bark. She waited. From the road, it looked like she might belong to the house inside, a single-story brick home, shuttered windows, a cracked path leading to a screen door. But no one came out. No one waved her in. And still, she stayed. The sun passed overhead, and the dog did not move. Only her ears flicked now and then at flies. Her ribs were visible even without much light, rising shallowly with each breath. The skin around her eyes was slightly pink, rubbed raw from scratching. But her gaze never wandered far from the gate. Now and then, someone passed on the gravel road, a boy with a bicycle, a woman in sandals, and they turned their heads, unsure whether she was stray or simply loyal. No one asked. No one stopped. In the small town, dogs are common, some with homes, some without. Most keep moving. But this one didn't. She hadn't arrived barking or hunting scraps. She hadn't dug under fences or scavenged bins. She had simply appeared. And now she waited. By late afternoon, heat shimmered off the metal gate. The dog lifted her head once, slow and tired, and looked toward the sound of footsteps on the porch. A screen door creaked. A man stepped out holding something, a plastic bag, maybe lunch, but he didn't glance her way. He shut the door behind him and drove off. The dog lay her head back down. The air turned cooler as shadows grew long. The dog shifted slightly, repositioning her body to rest against the base of the gate. Her nose touched the iron bar as if to anchor herself. Every few minutes she'd blink slowly, but there was no alertness in it, only endurance. By evening, the street emptied. A street lamp flickered near the corner. Somewhere down the road, a gate slammed and a child laughed. The sound didn't startle her. She was used to noise, but she didn't sleep. Her eyes stayed half open, watching the porch as dusk fell. Inside the house, a curtain moved once, perhaps someone peeking, but it closed quickly. A woman's voice murmured something from within, too quiet to hear. No one came out. No one placed a bowl. The dog remained motionless. That night, as insects filled the silence with their soft clicking, the temperature dropped. The concrete under her body held the warmth of the day, but not for long. Her legs twitched once. She didn't whine. She simply curled tighter. Back pressing against the base of the gate like she was trying to remember a shape. She didn't know what the house held, but she waited for it anyway. By morning, dew clung to her fur. The sun rose without fanfare. The dog stood once, stretched carefully, and lowered herself again. It wasn't the motion of a wanderer. It was the motion of someone holding a place. And as the town stirred awake again, she was still there, quiet, still, watching. The second day brought wind and a scattering of early rain, soft enough at first that the dust turned dark, but didn't run. The dog did not flinch when the drops began to fall. Her body remained folded into itself, head lowered, eyes fixed on the chipped red door across the garden. She didn't lick the moisture from the stones or move toward shelter. She simply let the weather touch her without resistance. Behind the fence, a clothesline swayed gently, its shirts dampening in slow waves. The curtains inside the house were drawn halfway now. Still, no one opened the door. By late morning, the rain thickened. A truck rumbled past, tires pushing water to either side of the road. The dog didn't lift her head. Her fur, once short and even, now matted slightly along the spine where the water gathered. At intervals, she blinked, slow and measured, but her posture stayed unchanged. She was not guarding. She was not seeking. She was waiting. and the waiting had become its own kind of stillness. That evening, the man returned. His boots stepped across the gravel drive. He paused on the porch, his keys in hand. The rain had stopped by then, but the ground remained slick. He looked toward the gate for only a second, then unlocked the door and disappeared inside. The screen clapped softly behind him. The dog didn't react. She kept her eyes on the threshold as the sky dimmed again. By the fourth day, her ribs were more pronounced. A passing cat startled near the edge of the road and hissed before darting under a hedge. The dog turned her head once, not with alarm, but with dull curiosity, then resumed her vigil. Children passed in pairs, some whispering about the gate dog. One child reached through with a stick and poked near her paws. She didn't growl. She didn't snap. She only shifted away, pressing her back gently against the fence again. Inside, the voices behind the windows came and went. A kettle whistled in the afternoons. A TV played faint music in the evening, but not once did a figure emerge. The dog's scent had begun to settle into the ground, mixing with the mineral smell of wet stone. Even the insects had grown used to her, crawling over her flanks without protest. That night, thunder cracked far off in the hills. The wind returned colder than before. The dog stood briefly, shook once, then lay back down, not for comfort, but to conserve what little strength she had. Her stomach didn't growl any more. It had quieted. The ache, if there was one, showed only in the slow pace of her breathing. By the end of the fifth day, her fur along the sides had flattened where her body touched the concrete. A few strands clung to the lower edge of the iron gate. Her eyes had dulled slightly, but the gaze never broke from the front door. Even when birds landed near, even when voices rose in argument inside, she did not look away. "If she wanders, she'll starve," someone said from a porch 2 houses down. But she didn't wander. She stayed. Even as clouds moved again over the ridge and the township dipped into another night, she stayed. And by dawn, she was there still, silent, unmoving, waiting for something the world seemed to have forgotten. The fourth morning came softer. The wind had calmed overnight, and the sky held a pale, even light that settled gently over the quiet row of houses. The dog had not moved from her place beneath the gate. Her legs were folded under her body in the same tight curve, her head resting low, ears flicking slightly at every distant sound. Her ribs were more visible now, the sharp outline of her hips pressed against the ground beneath her. She didn't tremble. She didn't bark. She only stared at the door, the same one that hadn't opened in days. By mid-morning, footsteps approached from the far side of the road. They weren't hurried or loud. Just steady. A man in worn jeans and a sun-faded shirt rounded the corner holding a half-loaf of bread wrapped in paper. He wasn't from this part of town. He didn't look toward the houses at first. His eyes were down, his gait even, as if he was on his way somewhere else entirely. But when he came parallel to the gate, he slowed. The dog didn't lift her head. She saw him, but she didn't move. He stopped near the edge of the fence, shifting the bread from one hand to the other. He crouched slowly, careful not to step too close. From this distance he could see the redness around her eyes, the cracked pads on her front paws, the way her sides barely rose with each breath. She didn't growl. She didn't even twitch. She only blinked once, slow and deliberate, and returned her gaze to the front door. The man rested on one knee. "I don't think they see you," he said softly, not expecting a response. She didn't react. Her silence wasn't cautious. It was exhausting. He reached into the paper and pulled free a torn piece of bread, setting it just beyond the gate, within her reach. Then another, smaller piece, a few inches closer to him. Still, she didn't move. A minute passed, then another. The man waited, elbow resting on his knee. His presence didn't disturb her. If anything, she seemed used to being ignored, or tolerated. Her tail didn't wag. Her ears didn't perk. But after several minutes, her nose shifted. Slowly, she lifted her head a few inches and sniffed. The scent of bread was faint, dulled by dust and distance. Her body remained coiled, uncertain, but her hunger betrayed her. She edged forward just once. A small crawl of her front paw, then again. It took nearly 5 minutes before she reached the first piece and swallowed it whole. She paused there, waited. The second piece lay closer to the man. He didn't move, didn't speak again. He only watched with soft patience as the dog, after another long minute, inched closer and took it. This time she didn't retreat. She stayed where she was, halfway between the spot she had chosen and the man kneeling in the dust. He reached gently into the paper again, set down the rest of the bread, and stood. He didn't try to touch her, didn't whistle, just left it there. Then he took 2 steps back and nodded once, as if acknowledging something unseen, and continued walking. The dog watched him go. She didn't follow. But she didn't return to her place beneath the gate either. She stayed right where she was, the bread beside her, her eyes now split between the man's fading form and the door that still hadn't opened. If she left the gate, she might be lost. If she stayed, she might be forgotten. But that morning, for the first time in days, someone had stopped, and the waiting felt just a little less alone. The next evening came with a low, golden haze hanging over the township, the kind of light that softens fences and washes rooftops in quiet warmth. Dust hovered just above the ground, stirred by a breeze that didn't quite cool the air. The dog was in the same place. She had shifted slightly since morning, now curled tighter, as if the stones beneath her held some trace of comfort. The small pile of bread from the day before was gone, though no one had seen her eat. The rusted gate still stood closed. The door behind it still hadn't moved. The man returned just before dusk. His walk was the same, unhurried, steady, as if this stop was already part of his rhythm. In his hand, another parcel. Not bread this time, but a bowl with something warm inside, wrapped in cloth. He approached the fence slowly, watching the figure still folded near the gate. She didn't lift her head. Not at first. He crouched a few feet away and unwrapped the bowl. The scent of rice and bone broth drifted on the air. Gently, he placed it down. She didn't move, not even a twitch, but her eyes opened and she watched him. The gaze was unblinking, quiet, unsettling in its depth. She looked at him not with suspicion and not quite with hope, but with something deeper, more fractured. He waited, not speaking, and in that silence he felt the weight of it. Hunger was there, yes, but behind it was something else, the dull, hollow stare of an animal that had been waiting too long, not for food. For something that hadn't come. He stepped back slowly. Only then did she move. Not quickly, not eagerly, just a slow, cautious rise to her feet. She walked stiffly as if the joints in her legs no longer bent easily. With measured steps, she approached the bowl, lowered her head, and began to eat. Not ravenous, just quiet, careful bites between glances upward. The man stayed still. He noticed the dried mud along her belly, the patch of fur missing behind her shoulder. Old injuries. Not recent, but never treated. Her breathing was shallow but even. She didn't make a sound. Just those small glances, brief flickers of eye contact, then back to the food. She was used to silence. It had become her language. He lowered his voice, barely above a whisper. "It's all right, girl." She didn't react, didn't flinch, but her ears shifted once, acknowledging the sound. She finished the bowl slowly, licked it clean, then backed away, not retreating, just returning. The same spot. The same curl of her legs beneath her. Her nose brushed the iron gate again before she rested her head. The man stood, collected the empty bowl, and wrapped it back in the cloth. Before leaving, he looked down at her one last time. Her eyes were open, watching. What he saw wasn't distrust. It was far away, the kind born from being seen and then forgotten. Again and again. If he didn't return, she wouldn't chase. If he left food, she wouldn't beg. She was not asking. She was remembering. He turned and walked away, slower than before. Not because she might follow. She wouldn't. But because he had seen something most people missed. Her body was surviving, but her eyes were telling a story no one had listened to in a long time. By late afternoon, the clouds over the township had thickened into a deep slate, pressing low across the rooftops. The air was dense and quiet, the kind of stillness that warns of sudden rain. A single drop hit the fence, then another. Within minutes, the dirt road turned dark and soft beneath the weight of a steady downpour. The gate where the dog had waited for nearly a week began to glisten with running water, rust bleeding faintly onto the stone beneath. And there she was, exactly where she had always been, curled at the base, her head low, eyes half closed against the weather. She didn't seek cover. Her body, lean and unmoving, had taken the shape of the concrete. Rain clung to her fur in uneven patches, darkening the lighter parts of her coat. Her ears flattened with the sound, but she didn't rise. There was no urgency in her, no panic. Just the quiet submission of something that had already known worse. Down the road, footsteps splashed through shallow puddles. The man came quickly this time without his usual steady rhythm. His jacket stuck to his arms. His hat was gone. In one hand he held a folded wool blanket, heavy with water at the edges, and in the other a sealed container. Food again, though its warmth had faded. He paused at the gate, water dripping from his sleeves, his breath rising soft and visible in the colder air. She didn't lift her head. He knelt slowly in the mud beside her, close enough to be heard but not close enough to touch. The food would wait. This was different. The rain wasn't slowing, and the concrete beneath her was pooling now, thin sheets running beneath her ribs. He unfolded the blanket with careful hands. It was old but clean. Wool, thick enough to hold what little heat there was left in the air. He whispered, "Just stay still," though she hadn't moved at all. With steady movements he laid the blanket over her, first along her back, then gently across her hips, tucking the sides beneath her belly as best he could without forcing her up. She didn't startle. She didn't shift. The only sign she gave was a blink. One slow, deliberate glance in his direction before her eyes closed again. The rain tapped against the fabric now draped over her, soft and muffled. For the first time since he had begun stopping by, he sat down. Not on the porch. Not at the edge of the road. There in the mud, next to the dog who had not left. He didn't speak again. He didn't offer food yet. He just sat, soaked to the bone, watching the house behind the gate, the closed windows, the unmoved door. Inside, a lamp flickered to life. Someone was home. They had always been home. If she waits like this much longer, he thought, she won't last. But even then, he didn't try to move her. He reached for the container, placed it nearby, and then leaned back against the fence. The rain continued, steady and even, and in that hour, nothing happened. No one came out. The dog didn't rise, and the gate never opened. But beneath the weight of the wool, her chest moved with slower breaths, not deep, but steady. And as night approached for the first time, she looked not at the door, but at him. Not long, just once. Then she rested her head again, and let the rain fall without fear. On the 7th morning, the rain had gone. The sky hung low with pale clouds, but the ground had begun to dry in uneven patches, dust returning to the spaces between stones. The township moved slowly again. Quiet foot traffic, faint radio sounds from behind windows, a broom sweeping somewhere 2 houses down. The dog remained at the base of the gate, her blanket still draped loosely over her flank. She hadn't moved through the night. The edge of the fabric was damp, stained by the mud. but she stayed folded beneath it, eyes barely open. She had eaten only once in the past day, just enough to keep her body from fading, but not enough to restore strength. Her ribs no longer seemed sharp, not because she'd gained weight, but because she had stopped shifting. Even her tail had remained still for hours. Only her ears, twitching now and then toward passing sounds, gave any sign she was still listening. The house behind the fence had been silent for days. Lights came on at night. Voices murmured behind thin walls, but the door never opened. The man hadn't returned yet this morning. Only the wind had come, carrying with it the scent of jasmine from a nearby bush and the faint warmth of bread from someone's kitchen. Then, just after noon, a sound broke the pattern. A hinge, slow, faint. The gate creaked open. Not fully, not enough for someone to walk through, just a small push. 10 inches, maybe less. It stopped against a stone, the rusted metal clicking as it settled. From the porch, a woman stepped out holding a small plastic bowl. She looked down toward the dog, said nothing, and walked to the threshold of the gate. Her shoes tapped softly on the path. The dog didn't rise. She watched. The woman set the bowl beside the step. Water, clear, still, filling just halfway. No food, no leash. No gesture of welcome, just the bowl. Then she turned, walked back inside, and closed the door. The curtains remained open now, but no face looked out. The dog didn't move toward the water. She didn't rise to investigate the gap in the fence, but her ears turned forward, sharp, focused. Her eyes flicked once from the door to the bowl, then back. Her body remained curled, but a tension had entered her spine, the kind that holds still not from fear, but from calculation. For 6 days, the gate had held a boundary she did not cross. Now, for the first time, it has opened. If she entered, what would she find? If she stayed, what would she miss? The water bowl sat untouched. The wind shifted again. The scent of the man's blanket, still slightly warm from where her body pressed it, rose faintly into the air. She blinked once. Slow. Then laid her head back on her front paws. She hadn't refused the water, but she hadn't accepted it either. Inside, the woman moved behind the curtain. A second figure, a boy, stood near the window watching her. No one opened the door again. No one stepped out. The gate remained ajar. The world held still for a long while, and though the dog did not take the step forward, something in her had changed. She had noticed. She had marked the shift. Her body stayed in place, but her ears twitched again toward the open gap. And she didn't look away. Night fell slowly over the township, washing the road in long shadows and soft amber light from the street lamp at the corner. The gate remained open, still just a few inches, untouched since midday. The bowl of water sat near the step, half evaporated, undisturbed. The dog had not moved toward it. She hadn't moved at all, not since the sun had passed over the rooftops. Her body stayed low, curled, her eyes tracking only the occasional shapes that drifted past on the road. People walking home. A cart rolling by. Nothing changed her stillness. Until he came. The man appeared just after sunset, same time as the days before, though this time he carried nothing. No bowl, no blanket. Just his hands in his pockets, his head lowered slightly as he walked the narrow edge of the road. His boots were coated in red dust, steps quiet against the loose gravel. He didn't look toward the gate, didn't pause at the house, but the rhythm of his walk slowed, as if expecting to be seen. She saw him. And for the first time in nearly a week, she stood, not quickly, not with energy, but with purpose. Her legs straightened beneath her, stiff and uneven, and her head lifted fully. The blanket slipped from her shoulders, landing softly on the concrete. Her eyes followed his movement. He passed the gate. She stepped forward, not through the opening, not toward the bowl, but alongside the fence until she reached the corner post. Then, with a small shift of her front paw, she crossed the edge of the property and entered the road behind him. The man didn't stop, but he knew. He didn't look back, didn't call her. His pace slowed just enough. The dog walked 3 paces behind. No sound, no panting. Her tail hung low, relaxed. Her steps were uncertain but steady. Each time he turned a corner, she followed. When a car passed, she paused until it was gone. When he reached the broken sidewalk near the old post box, she moved closer. Not touching, but near enough to be seen. The houses grew farther apart the deeper they walked. Lights grew fewer. Crickets began to sing along the ditch banks. He reached the edge of the neighborhood where a path veered toward a single cottage tucked behind a hedge. Still, he didn't turn around. He walked to the gate, unlatched it, and stepped through. Behind him, the dog stopped at the end of the road. He reached the porch and stood still, then opened the door. A soft light spilled out, painting a faint path across the grass. The scent of warm cloth and old wood drifted out with it. He didn't speak, didn't wave, he just waited. She didn't move for a long time. Then she took one step, then another. She didn't run. She didn't hesitate. She simply walked, closing the distance between where she had been forgotten and where she might be seen. And though he never turned to look, his hand rested gently on the inside of the door, holding it open just long enough for her to decide. When she reached the threshold, she paused, not out of fear, but as if she needed to feel what it was like, to arrive without being chased, without being called, without being claimed. Then she crossed the doorway, and he quietly closed the door behind her. Dawn crept over the township with a quiet so soft it barely registered against the tin rooftops and gravel paths. The sky was pale, cloudless, and washed in the faint silver light that comes just before the sun. At the edge of the property, under the low eaves of a quiet cottage, the dog lay curled on the porch, her nose tucked beneath a worn wool blanket. It was the same one he had laid across her in the rain days before. She had carried it with her somehow, clutched it between her teeth, dragged it across the yard, until it had settled where she did, on a strip of wood beneath the door she had chosen not to fear. She hadn't left during the night. She hadn't returned to the gate or the sidewalk or the place where she'd once waited without answers. She had followed. Then she stayed. There were no ropes, no crates, no orders. Only a porch, a blanket, and a door that had been left ajar long enough to let her decide. Her breathing was slow. Not labored, but steady. The kind of sleep that doesn't worry about interruption. Her spine curled neatly, one paw crossed over the other. She hadn't eaten since the morning before. But hunger didn't pull at her the way it once had. There was something different now. Not comfort exactly, but permission. To rest. To exist without guard. Inside the house, soft sounds stirred. The clink of a cup. The scrape of a chair leg across the tile. Then the latch shifted and the front door opened part way. The man stepped into the doorway, holding a mug in one hand, still in the shirt he'd slept in. His eyes landed on the small shape on the porch. She hadn't flinched at the noise. Her ears twitched faintly, but she didn't lift her head. He stood there for a moment, saying nothing. The blanket had shifted down her side in the night. He knelt, gently adjusted it back over her hips, careful not to touch anything that might startle. But she didn't move away. She opened her eyes, just barely, and looked up at him. That same gaze. Steady. Quiet, not pleading, not uncertain, just there. The man stepped aside and opened the door wider. She stood slowly. Her legs were thin, and her back paw dragged slightly for a moment before finding balance. The blanket slipped free again, landing in a soft pile behind her. She didn't look at it, didn't sniff the edge or turn back. She walked forward, one paw inside the threshold, then another. Not quickly and not with hesitation. Just a slow, silent entrance that made no noise at all. She didn't explore the house, didn't sniff the corners or search for food. She walked to a patch of woven rug near the door and lay down. It was warm from sunlight, clean. She lowered her chest to the floor, front paws stretching long in front of her, and rested her head between them. Her eyes remained open for a time, watching the light move on the floor. The man placed his mug on the nearby table and sat down in the chair by the window. He didn't reach for her, didn't speak, just watched as she blinked again, slower this time. Her breathing evened. Her body melted slightly into the rug. The tension in her shoulders faded, and her eyelids dropped closed. Not from exhaustion, from safety. Outside, the morning softened even more. A bird called twice from the hedge. Leaves rustled faintly as a breeze moved through the neem tree. The blanket remained on the porch, caught on the edge of the step, one corner rising gently with the wind. Far across the township, the rusted gate where she had once waited was still open, just a few inches, untouched since the day it creaked apart. The bowl of water inside had long since dried. No one had come looking. No one had called her name. There was no name to call. But now she has crossed a different threshold. She had entered without asking, and she didn't look back.